Listen closely to the air in this room. If we quiet the immediate chatter of our expectations, we can hear a distinct sharp metallic sharpness cutting through the silence, like a heavy winter frost settling over cold flagstones. It is the sound of an invisible mechanism, an ancient grandfather clock whose iron gears have been oiled too many times with our own adrenaline, ticking with a terrifying, rhythmic precision inside the marrow of our bones. We sit here, surrounded by the invisible architecture of our achievements, our screens glowing with the quiet panic of 100 unread demands, our calendars carved up into microunits of efficiency, yet there is a strange, pervasive friction that we cannot seem to outrun. We have built a world where everything is functional, everything is optimized, and yet, as we sit in the middle of this engineered perfection, a profound, heavy weight settles onto our chest. We feel an underlying, unspoken exhaustion that has nothing to do with a lack of sleep and everything to do with the way we inhabit our own skin. We are present in body, but our attention is constantly leaning 3 inches forward into the next minute, the next hour, the next urgent fire we must extinguish. We have transformed the simple act of existing into a corporate campaign, an endless series of milestones to be conquered, swallowed, and integrated into our identity. Let us bring our awareness down from the abstract sky of our thoughts and land squarely within the physical perimeter of our own flesh. Let us observe the quiet, hidden civil war occurring right now behind the surface of our skin, without changing anything, without trying to correct or heal or improve. Let us simply feel where we are holding the perimeter line. Notice the back molars. Notice the precise, almost imperceptible point where the upper and lower teeth meet in a silent, locked embrace. For most of us, this contact is not gentle, it is a structural clench, a microbracing that has become so continuous, so normative, that we no longer recognize it as an act of violence against our own nervous system. The masseter muscles, those thick bands of tissue anchoring our lower mandible to our skull, are coiled like overwound springs. We are biting down. We are biting down on the silence. We are biting down on our anxiety. We are biting down on the very air of this room, as if it were a scarce commodity that might be snatched away if we relax our guard for even a single breath. We check an email and the jaw tightens. We listen to a colleague speak and the back teeth lock. We walk through a crowded street and the temporal fascia becomes an iron helmet, squeezing the brain, narrowing our vision until the world is reduced to a series of targets and obstacles. We have become a civilization of high-functioning gatherers, but instead of foraging for berries, we are foraging for validation, data, and security, and we are using our mouths to hunt. We treat time not as a river that carries us, but as a hard, fibrous material that must be aggressively chewed, processed, and digested. We speak of biting off more than we can chew, of gritting our teeth through difficult seasons, of sinking our teeth into a new project, without ever realizing that these are not mere figures of speech. They are literal diagnostic descriptions of our somatic reality. We have weaponized our anatomy against the present moment. The jaw is meant to open wide to receive nourishment, and to close to process what is life-giving, but we have frozen it into an eternal state of execution. We are perpetually masticating the future before it even arrives, trying to pre-chew our problems so that when they finally land in our lap, they won't be able to hurt us. Look at how we walk through our days, carrying this hidden anvil in our skull. We believe we are thinking, we believe we are strategizing, but our body knows the truth. We are panicking in slow motion. This clench is our ancestral heritage adapted for the modern office. When our ancestors encountered a predator in the tall grass, the primitive brainstem sent an instantaneous electrical surge to the masseter muscles, locking the jaw to protect the skull from fracturing during a strike, or preparing the teeth to tear through flesh in a desperate bid for survival. Today, there are no saber-toothed tigers in our living rooms, Yet our biology cannot distinguish between an apex predator and a critical text message from a manager or a fluctuating line on a stock market chart. The modern predator is invisible. It is the ghost of insufficiency, the terrifying narrative that we are not doing enough, being enough, or earning enough to justify our place on this earth. And so, the body responds with the only language it knows. It prepares for impact. It hardens the jaw. It tightens the temple. It turns the skull into a fortress. We sit at our desks, carefully crafting an aura of professional calm, our faces arranged into masks of polite competence, while beneath the skin, a massive hydraulic press is operating at maximum capacity. The force we exert on our own teeth during these periods of unconscious clenching is immense, capable of cracking enamel. Yet we do it for hours, without registering a single unit of pain, because our minds are completely disembodied, floating in the digital ether of our schedules. We have severed the connection between the head and the heart, leaving the head to act as an isolated, hypervigilant manager that must oversee the operations of our life with an iron fist. We treat our bodies like a vehicle we are driving to a meeting an unruly, unpredictable animal that must be whipped into submission whenever it shows signs of fatigue or resistance. If the shoulder aches, we take a pill. If the jaw locks, we wear a plastic guard at night, treating the symptom as an annoying mechanical failure rather than a desperate, non-verbal scream from our deepest layers of tissue. We must ask ourselves, what are we actually trying to hold together with this clench? What is the catastrophe we believe will occur if we simply let the lower jaw drop, if we let the tongue fall soft, if we allow the mouth to become an empty receptive cavern? The terrifying truth that our ego refuses to face is that we are afraid of our own emptiness. We are afraid that if we stop processing, stop gripping, and stop managing reality for even a single minute, the entire structure of our life will dissolve into chaos. We use the clench as an anchor against the terrifying fluid nature of existence. We live in a world where everything we love is subject to decay, where our health can turn on a dime, where our relationships can fracture in an afternoon, and where our professional status can be wiped out by an algorithm. This is the inherent friction of human life, the fundamental instability of all conditioned things. Rather than leaning into this truth, rather than learning how to swim in this ocean of change, we try to bite down on the water. We try to turn the fluid stream of reality into a solid block of ice that we can control, shape, and master. Consider the sheer volume of sensory data we force ourselves to swallow every single day. From the moment our eyes open in the morning and our hands instinctively reach for the cold glass of our smartphones, we are inundating our consciousness with an unmanageable feast of stimuli. We are swallowing the news of distant wars, the curated successes of our peers, the aesthetic perfections of strangers, the urgent demands of our employers, and the endless commentary of a culture that never sleeps. Our minds are like an ancient, primitive stomach, forced to digest a toxic mountain of processed information. Because we have no ritual container to purge this excess, because we do not know how to sit still and let the sediment settle to the bottom of the pool. The accumulation stays trapped in our tissues. It migrates downward from the eyes, past the sinuses, and pools directly in the hinges of the jaw. The jaw becomes the ultimate waste reclamation site for our unexpressed emotions. It is where we bury the anger we couldn't voice because it wasn't professional. It is where we store the grief we couldn't weep because we didn't have time on our schedule. It is where we lock away the primal scream of a creature that is profoundly lonely despite being connected to a global network of billions. We have built a collective myth that tension is the price of admission for a meaningful life. We look at those who are relaxed, those who move slowly, those who allow wide spaces of unstructured time in their days, and we secretly judge them as lazy, inefficient, or lacking ambition. We have moralized stress. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor, a proof of our value in the marketplace. When someone asks us how we are, the socially mandated response is to sigh and say, "So busy," as if emptiness were a failure of character. But if we trace this busyness down to its somatic root, we find that it is not driven by a genuine love for our work or a deep commitment to our purpose. It is driven by a profound, trembling fear of stillness. In the stillness, the illusion of control begins to crack. In the stillness, we are forced to feel the deep, resonant ache of our own vulnerability. We are forced to confront the fact that we cannot control the wind, the rain, or the hearts of those around us. And so, to avoid that confrontation, we step back onto the treadmill. We crank up the speed. We tighten the jaw. We tell ourselves that we are just grinding through this week, just surviving this quarter, just pushing through until the next vacation, ignoring the fact that our vacations have become just another project to be managed, photographed, and consumed. Let us sit with this realization for a moment. Let us even now, and I contemplate these words, there is a subtle temptation to turn this insight into another task. The mind wants to grasp this information, to chew on it, to analyze it, to create a strategy for how to fix our locked jaw. The internal manager is already drawing up a plan, creating a checklist for relaxation, preparing to use effort to eradicate effort. This is the ultimate trap of the modern intellect. We try to use the very tool that created the prison to break down the walls. We try to force ourselves to relax with the same aggression we use to force ourselves to perform. We bite down on the concept of mindfulness, turning it into another credential to be acquired, another performance metric to be tracked. We must see this loop for what it is. A dog chasing its own tail in a closed room, generating heat but never finding an exit. To break this loop, we do not need more effort. We do not need a new technique, a better exercise, or a more advanced philosophy. We need a radical, elegant cessation of doing. We need to enter into a state of deep observation, where we simply witness the mechanism without trying to fix it. We need to look at our clench, not with the critical, evaluating eye of a judge or a doctor examining a pathology, but with the tender, unblinking curiosity of a mother watching a child sleep. We need to understand that this tension is not an enemy to be destroyed. It is an old, tired soldier that has been standing guard at the gates of our city for decades, trying to keep us safe from a war that ended a long time ago. It does not need to be executed, it needs to be relieved of its duty. It needs to be told that the perimeter is secure, that the sky is clear, and that it is finally safe to lay its weapons down in the grass. Let us take a moment to breathe into this space of non-correction. Feel the weight of the skull resting on the topmost vertebra of the spine. Realize that this bone, this fragile ivory pillar, has been carrying the entire weight of our psychological world. It has been balancing not just the physical weight of our brain, but the weight of our ancestral expectations, our professional ambitions, and our existential anxieties. Let us allow that weight to drop down through the spinal column, past the shoulder blades, past the rib cage, down into the heavy, solid bowl of the pelvis, and finally into the floor beneath us. Let us allow ourselves to be heavy. Let us allow ourselves to be unsupported by our own muscular striving. Let us trust, for just a few consecutive seconds, that the earth is solid enough to hold us without our assistance. We do not need to hold ourselves up. We do not need to hold our world together. The universe has been expanding for 13 billion years without our micromanagement, and it will continue to turn even if we let our teeth part, even if we let our breath drop into our bellies, even if we allow ourselves to become completely, beautifully useless for a brief moment in time. As we rest in this shared somatic field, let us notice how the quality of the room shifts when we stop trying to accomplish something. The air feels thicker, cooler, more alive. The sounds from the street outside, distant hum of traffic, the occasional shout, the rustle of leaves are no longer distractions breaking into our sanctuary. They are simply waves of energy passing through a vast, open space. When we stop biting down on the world ceases to be an adversary. It becomes our environment, a fluid, breathing extension of our own awareness. We begin to understand that the boundary we have drawn between inside and outside, between ourself and the world, is a fictional line maintained only by the chronic tension of our tissues. The clench is the ego's border patrol, a physical fence we erect to separate our small, fragile identity from the infinite current of life. When the fence softens, the illusion of separation begins to bleed out into the wide, unmapped sky of pure being. Let us stay here, on the threshold of this deeper inquiry. We have identified the symptom, we have felt the iron rings of the mechanism tightening around our skull. We see how we have trapped ourselves in an endless cycle of consumption and resistance, using our physical body as a shield against the uncertainty of life. We are no longer blind to the invoice our ambition is extracting from our health, but to truly unlock this machine, to truly dissolve the rust that has accumulated on our inner millstone, we must go deeper than the muscles. We must descend into the psychological basement of our conditioning. We must examine the specific identity we have constructed around this clench, the archetype of the one who survives by grinding. We must stand naked before the mirror of our own experience, without our titles, without our accomplishments, without our defensive armor, and ask ourselves who we are when the mechanism finally stops ticking. We must prepare ourselves to look directly into the eyes of our deepest habits. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It requires a quiet, fierce courage to look at our own suffering without turning away, to sit in the fire of our own discomfort until it burns away our illusions. We are not looking for a quick fix or a soothing lullaby to send our awareness back to sleep. We are seeking a fundamental rewiring of our relationship to reality, a somatic revolution that begins in the deep, dark hinges of the mouth and ends in the complete liberation of our spirit. Let us take one more collective breath together, feeling the expansion of the ribs, the soft rise of the collarbones, and as we exhale, let us let the teeth part by just a millimeter more, entering into the vast, silent valley of the unknown. To cross this threshold, we must look directly into the mirror of our contemporary lives and recognize the specific ghost that haunts our architecture. We see this ghost embodied in an archetype we all know intimately, the one we might call the high-functioning executor. This is the version of ourselves that steps up to the podium of our daily lives, immaculate, efficient, and thoroughly armored. This is the identity that receives the emails at midnight and answers them by 12:5. The one who manages the household, coordinates the corporate merger, maintains the social calendar, and tracks their fitness metrics with mathematical devotion. On the surface, this character is a masterpiece of modern socialization. They are poised, their posture is controlled, and their voice rarely trembles. They are the pillar upon which families, corporations, and social networks rest. But if we move our eyes away from the external resume and bring our attention to the physical reality of this archetype, we see a tragic invoice being printed out in the dark archives of the flesh. Let us dissect the physical body of this high performer as they sit before a computer screen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If we were to draw an anatomical map of their internal weather, we would see a system of severe systemic compression. The jaw is not an isolated island of tension. It is the northern peak of an entire mountain range of bracing that runs through the deep front line of our fascia. Look at the shoulders. The levator scapulae and upper trapezius muscles are pulled upward and forward, creating a tight protective harness around the root of the neck. It is as if the shoulders are trying to rise up and whisper into the ears, shielding the vulnerable carotid arteries from an expected blow. The collarbones are locked, pinned in a permanent state of minor elevation, which completely paralyzes the upper ribs. Because the upper chest is frozen in this defensive armor, the breathing has no choice but to alter its nature. It becomes high, rapid, and profoundly shallow. The breath no longer travels down into the deep, dark reservoir of the abdomen. Instead, it bounces frantically in the top third of the lungs, a thin, frantic gasping for oxygen that signals to the amygdala that we are in a state of perpetual, low-grade survival. If we trace this tension further down past the constricted heart space, we encounter the thoracic diaphragm, that great dome of muscle that should move like a gentle, undulating jellyfish with every inhalation and exhalation. In our high-functioning executor, this jellyfish is paralyzed. It is held in a vice-like grip, rigid and unmoving, creating a profound energetic border between the upper torso and the lower belly. The solar plexus feels cold, hard and knotty, like an old piece of wood that has been left out in the rain and then dried too quickly in the sun. And at the very southern terminus of this line, hidden beneath the tailored fabric of our clothes, the pelvic bowl is locked. The deep hip flexors, the psoas major and minor, are shortened and tense, pulling the tailbone slightly forward into a subconscious tuck, as if the animal within us is trying to protect its soft underbelly from a predator's teeth. The entire organism is suspended in a state of high-voltage anticipation. We are sitting in an ergonomically designed chair, typing a memo about quarterly projections, but anatomically, we are braced for a head-on vehicular collision. Let us feel the specific sensation of the jaw in this moment. The masseter muscle is a biological marvel by weight. It is the most powerful muscle in the human frame, capable of exerting a force of over 200 pounds across the molars. When we are stuck in the archetype of the executor, this immense hydraulic press is engaged not to chew food, but to chew through our reality. The back teeth are pressed together with such continuous, silent ferocity that the periodontal ligaments, tiny, sensitive cushions that anchor the teeth into the jawbone, are completely compressed, starved of blood and fluid. This pressure travels upward through the zygomatic arch, entering the temporal muscles that fan out across the sides of our skull. This is why our forehead feels hot, why our temples throb with a dull, background ache at the end of the day, and why the skin of our scalp feels as though it has been shrunk-wrapped around our bone. We have created an internal pressure cooker, and the lid is bolted down by the hinges of the mouth. Why do we do this to ourselves? What is the psychological seed that produces this bitter physical fruit? If we sit quietly with the high-functioning executor within us, we find a deep foundational trauma that has been rewarded by society until it looks like a virtue. It is the core belief that our survival is entirely dependent upon our effort. At some point in our formative years, the wide-open, unconditioned space of our childhood was interrupted by a demand. We learned that to be loved, to be safe, to be included, we had to perform. We had to be the good child, the smart student, the reliable worker, the strong protector. We internalized the voice of the world, transforming it into an internal auditor who sits in the central control room of our mind, clipboard in hand, logging every mistake, every moment of hesitation, and every symptom of fatigue. This auditor tells us a seductive, terrifying lie. If you relax your grip for even a half-turn of the gear, everything you have built will slide into the abyss. If you don't hold the jaw tight, your boundaries will dissolve, your incompetence will be exposed, and you will be left abandoned in the cold. So, the clench becomes our primary strategy for emotional regulation. When an emotion rises from the deep waters of the belly, perhaps an overwhelming wave of sadness, an explosion of righteous anger, or a terrifying sense of helplessness, it travels upward through the highway of the spine. It wants to be expressed. It wants to move through the throat and out of the mouth as a sob, a shout, or an honest declaration of our limits. But the internal auditor deems this dangerous. To weep is to be weak. To scream is to lose control, to say, "I cannot do." This is to invite dismissal, therefore, As the wave of emotional energy reaches the neck, we activate the emergency brake. We clamp the jaw shut. We turn the throat into an iron pipe. We swallow the emotion back down into the darkness, burying it under a fresh layer of muscular tension. The masseter muscles become the cemetery of our unuttered truths. Every time we smile and say everything is fine, while our world is breaking apart, we add another pound of pressure to the back teeth. Every time we accept another task we don't have the capacity to fulfill without complaining, we tighten the temporal screws. We must understand that this is not a mechanical error, it is a psychological choice that has become a somatic habit. We are terrified of what lies on the other side of the clench. If we were to let the jaw drop completely, if we were to let the mouth soften into a wide, receptive emptiness, the internal dam would break. The grief of a decade of overworking would come rushing up. The long-buried anger at being exploited or misunderstood would flood the room. The primal terror of our own insignificance would demand to be felt. To avoid this cataclysm, we choose the slow, familiar torture of the clench. We prefer the predictable ache of our teeth to the unpredictable wildness of our true feelings. We would rather wear out our joints and crack our teeth than spend a single hour sitting in the raw, uncurated reality of our human vulnerability. This is where the tragedy of our modern lifestyle deepens. Because we cannot tolerate this internal landscape, we seek external distractions to drown out the silent scream of our bodies. We finish our day of high-pressure execution, and we do not rest. We do not sit under a tree and watch the light fade from the sky. Instead, we take our locked jaws to the gym, where we grit our teeth through a high-intensity workout, forcing our already exhausted muscles to perform yet another series of metrics. Or we sit on our couches and open our laptops, processing entertainment with the same analytical, aggressive focus we used for our spreadsheets. We consume podcasts at double speed. We scroll through short-form videos like a machine gun firing images into our retinas. We drink alcohol to chemically numb the tension, or we take supplements to force our nervous system into a synthetic calm. We are trying to cure the effects of hyperstimulation with more stimulation, trying to solve the problem of consumption by consuming more. Let us look closely at how this manifests in our relationships. When two people with locked jaws sit across a dinner table from one another, true intimacy is impossible. Intimacy requires a porousness, an ability to receive the other person's presence into one's own somatic field without defense. But the high-functioning executor cannot receive. Their mouth is closed. Their boundaries are reinforced with iron rebar. Their listening is not an act of surrender, but an act of strategic calculation. They are not hearing the music of the other person's soul, they are listening for data points, analyzing the conversation, preparing their response before the other person has even finished speaking. The tongue resting heavily at the roof of the mouth, ready to spring into action, to advise, to correct, to manage, or to defend. The conversation becomes an intellectual fencing match rather than a communion of hearts. We leave the table feeling full of food, but profoundly starved of connection, returning to our separate beds to grind our teeth into the midnight air, wondering why we feel so utterly alone in the middle of our beautifully arranged lives. We must realize that this state of chronic tension is an act of deep non-acceptance of the present moment. Every micro-clench is a silent muscular no directed at reality. We are saying no to the fact that we are tired. No to the fact that this meeting is boring. No to the fact that we cannot control the outcome of this project. No to the very fact that we are mortal, fragile creatures who cannot outproduce our own biology. We are fighting a war against the fundamental laws of nature. We are trying to build an empire of permanence in a universe where everything is made of smoke and morning mist. The house we live in, the company we work for, the body we inhabit, the people we love, all of them are changing, sliding down the long slope of impermanence toward their eventual dissolution. This is not a dark or depressing thought, it is simply the truth of how things are. But to the ego, to the high-functioning executor, this truth is an insult. It is a direct threat to its authority, and so the ego responds by hardening its shell. It tenses the tissue, it locks the bones, it hurls its weight against the current of time, trying to force the river to run backward. Let us feel the sheer exhaustion of this enterprise. Let us trace the invisible lines of force that go into maintaining this posture for 30, 40, or 50 years. It is like holding a heavy iron ball at arm's length, 24 hours a day, and trying to convince yourself and everyone else that it weighs nothing at all. The energy required to suppress our true nature, to hold down our grief, to muzzle our anger, and to police our thoughts is immense. It is energy that should be used for creativity, for joy, for deep, restorative rest, and for spontaneous love. Instead, it is entirely consumed by the security apparatus of our identity. We are spending our life force to fund our own prison. We are the inmate, the prison guard, and the architect of the jail, all at the same time, and we are working double shifts to make sure the doors remain locked. Let us slow down our observation even further, moving deeper into the very microstructure of this tension. Look at how the tongue behaves when the jaw is locked. In a healthy, relaxed animal, the tongue rests lightly, like a soft, wet leaf on the floor of the mouth, its tip floating just behind the lower front teeth, completely passive. But in the body of our high-functioning executor, the tongue is an active combatant. It is suctioned violently to the hard palate of the roof of the mouth, or it is pressed hard against the inner surfaces of the teeth, as if it is trying to push them outward to create more room for its own anxiety. The root of the tongue, which connects deep into the hyoid bone and the throat fascia, is pulled backward and downward, creating a structural constriction in the airway. This means that every breath we take must fight its way through a narrow, defensive canyon of tissue. We are literally strangling our own vitality, microdosing ourselves with suffocation throughout the day, all to maintain the illusion that we are in control of our destiny. Consider the consequences of this somatic posture on our mental landscape. The brain is not separate from the body, it is an organ that sits at the top of a continuous network of nerves. When the masseter and temporal muscles are continuously firing, they send a non-stop stream of high-priority electrical signals up through the trigeminal nerve directly into the brainstem and the insular cortex. This stream of data says one thing over and over again: danger, danger, prepare for impact. The brain, receiving this reports from the flesh, has no choice but to interpret the world through a lens of suspicion. It begins to look for threats where none exist. It turns an ambiguous comment from a partner into an insult. It turns a minor delay in a schedule into a catastrophe. It turns a quiet evening of unscheduled time into an existential void that must be immediately filled with work or distraction. The mind becomes a hypervigilant radar system, scanning the horizon for storms, unable to rest in the sunshine that is present right now. We believe we are anxious because our lives are stressful, but the truth is often the inverse. We are anxious because our jaws are locked, and our bodies are telling our minds that we are at war. We must sit with the gravity of this diagnosis. We must see that our chronic tension is not a small cosmetic issue to be resolved with a massage or a vacation. It is a fundamental distortion of our relationship to existence. It is the physical manifestation of our refusal to trust life. We treat the universe as a hostile entity that must be managed and negotiated with, rather than the very womb that brought us forth and sustains us. We forget that we are not separate entities dropped into a cold, mechanical world. We are expressions of the earth itself, just like the leaves on the trees or the waves on the sea. The same intelligence that moves the tides and guides the migration of birds is currently beating our hearts and growing our hair, without any help from our conscious mind. But the high-functioning executor does not trust this intelligence. It believes that if it stops its micromuscular striving, the heart will stop beating, the world will stop turning, and it will cease to exist. Let us gently, with immense compassion, hold this suffering in our awareness. Let us look at this archetype within us, this tired, overworked manager who has forgotten how to play, forgotten how to rest, and forgotten how to simply be. See how hard they have tried. See how many burdens they have carried for us. They are not evil. They are not broken. They are just profoundly mistaken. They have been running on an obsolete operating system, using an old survival strategy that was designed for a jungle we no longer live in. It is time to show them another way. It is time to bring the light of awareness down into the dark basement of this conditioning and begin the delicate, surgical work of dismantling the machine, not with violence, but with a deep, unblinking understanding of its mechanics. Let us allow our awareness to settle into the hinges of the jaw, right into the center of the clench, and prepare to meet the ancient wisdom that can set us free. To understand how we might dissolve this iron knot, we must bring a different kind of instrument to the operating table of our awareness. We cannot use the blunt instrument of our willpower, because willpower is simply the executive manager wearing a different set of clothes. If we try to force our jaw to relax, we are simply introducing a new form of aggression into an already traumatized territory. We are telling the muscle that it is wrong, that it is failing, that it must perform relaxation according to a new set of metrics. Instead, we must bring the sharp, delicate scalpel of a timeless observation that does not judge, does not correct, and does not demand a result. We must look at the mechanism through the eyes of the historical awakening that occurred under the Bodhi tree. An awakening that was not a triumph of willpower, but a triumph of radical, unblinking investigation into the way the mind constructs its own torment. Let us examine what happens when an event drops into our life. A deadline is brought forward. A partner speaks in a tone that triggers our insecurity. A sudden financial expense appears on our screen. This is what the ancient frameworks call the first arrow. The first arrow is the raw reality of existence. It is the physical sensation of the phone vibrating in our palm, the factual data of the email, the natural biological response of a nervous system encountering a stimulus. The first arrow is inevitable. As long as we inhabit a physical vessel made of flesh, bone, and blood, we will be struck by the first arrow. We will feel tiredness. We will encounter conflict. We will experience the friction of a world that does not conform to our desires. The historical tradition does not promise a life free of the first arrow. The world is a wild, unpredictable weather system, and to live in it means to be rained upon, to be struck by the wind, and to occasionally stumble in the dark. But what happens next is where our tragedy truly begins. Within a millisecond of the first arrow striking our skin, our mind fires a second arrow into the exact same wound. And it is this second arrow that causes the long, chronic agony of our lives. The second arrow is our psychological reaction to the first. It is the internal narrative that springs to life around the event. It is the voice that screams, "This shouldn't be happening. Why does this always happen to me? If I don't fix this right now, my life will fall apart." The second arrow is the judgment we pass on our own fatigue. It is the anxiety we generate about our anxiety. It is the demand that our reality be different than it is right now. And while the first arrow causes a fleeting, sharp pinch of discomfort, the second arrow is what locks our jaw. The second arrow is the hydraulic fluid that enters the masseter muscle, inflating it into an iron wall of defense. Let us dissect the mechanics of this second arrow as it operates within our body. The first arrow arrives in the form of a difficult conversation with a loved one. The heart rate increases slightly, a wave of heat moves up the chest. This is simply the intelligence of the animal preparing to navigate a social challenge. But then, the internal auditor fires the second arrow. It interprets the heat as a sign of weakness. It interprets the conflict as a threat to our identity. It says you must control this situation, you must win this argument, you must not let them see that you are hurt. To execute this command, the mind constructs an iron barrier at the throat. It sends an immediate, high-voltage signal to the jaw. Bite down, lock the perimeter, do not let the truth escape, and do not let the external world penetrate your core. The physical clench we feel in our molars is not a response to the other person's words. It is the physical impact of our own second arrow tearing through our tissue. We are wounding ourselves with our own defense mechanisms, over and over again, every hour of every day. We must see that the second arrow is entirely an invention of the ego, that fictional manager we have installed in the center of our consciousness. The ego lives in a state of perpetual terror because it knows, deep down, that it is an illusion. It is not a solid, unchanging, sovereign entity that stands independent of the world. It is simply a collection of memories, conditioning, habits and fears, woven together by a continuous stream of thoughts. It is like a cloud that looks solid from a distance but dissolves into thin air the moment you try to touch it. Because it is inherently unstable, the ego is obsessed with safety, permanence and control. It wants to turn everything it encounters into a solid, unchanging object that it can possess and manipulate. It looks at the fluid, ever-changing river of reality and tries to build a concrete dam across it, using our muscles as the building blocks. This brings us to the core of the illusion. The belief in a permanent, independent self that must be defended at all costs. We think, I am the one who is stressed. I am the one who must achieve. I am the one who must hold this world together. We separate ourselves from the environment, viewing everything outside of our skin as a potential adversary or a resource to be harvested. When we live from this place of deep division, tension is the only logical outcome. If you are an isolated soldier stranded in an enemy territory, you must wear your armor 24 hours a day. You cannot afford to let your jaw drop. You cannot afford to let your belly relax. You cannot afford to sleep without one eye open. The chronic clench of our high-functioning executor is the somatic expression of this existential loneliness. It is the physical manifestation of a mind that believes it is entirely separate from the universe, completely on its own, fighting a losing battle against time and decay. Let us use our scalpel to cut even deeper into this illusion. Let us look at our primary metaphor image of the rusting millstone. Imagine an ancient stone wheel, massive and heavy, balanced on a wooden axis in the center of a village. For centuries, this millstone has been used to grind wheat into flour, providing sustenance for the community. When there is grain between the stones, the friction is productive, the wheat is transformed into food, and the motion has a clear, life-giving purpose. This is equivalent to the healthy, natural execution of a task in our daily life: writing a document, preparing a meal, cleaning a room. The mind is focused, the body is engaged, and the energy moves toward a creative resolution. But what happens to our millstone when the grain runs out? In a healthy village, the water wheel is diverted, the motion stops, and the heavy stones are allowed to rest in the cool shade of the barn. But in our modern internal landscape, the water wheel is never diverted. The stream of our adrenaline, fueled by notifications, demands, and performance anxieties, continues to rush over the gears day and night. The grain has long been cleared from the platform. The work of the day is finished. We are lying in our beds at 2 o'clock in the morning, under a soft blanket in a secure room. Yet, the millstone continues to spin at maximum velocity. And because there is no grain left to process, the heavy upper stone begins to grind directly against the lower stone. Can you hear the sound of that collision? It is a horrific, high-pitched screech of rock scraping against rock, generating a white-hot heat that smells of burning sulfur. The stones are wearing down their own marrow, pulverizing their own surfaces into a fine grey dust that chokes the air of the room. This is exactly what is happening in the hinges of our mouth when we clench our teeth at night. The actual work of the day is done. There are no problems that can be solved at midnight. There is no grain to grind. Yet, the mental manager is spinning the wheel, processing non-existent future scenarios, chewing through past conversations, masticating our anxieties until the bone itself begins to ache. We are destroying our own machinery out of a habit of perpetual execution. Let us contemplate the profound tragedy of this loop. We believe that this grinding is what keeps us safe, what makes us successful, what ensures our survival. We look at our achievements, the titles, the financial security, the beautifully curated life, and we credit our hypervigilance for these rewards. We say, I am successful because I grind. I am secure because I never let my guard down. This is the ultimate deception of the second arrow. It takes credit for the natural intelligence and creativity of our being, convincing us that our suffering is the source of our success. But if we look closely, we see that we are successful not because of the clench, but in spite of it. The clench is not the engine of our creativity. It is the emergency brake that we are riding, while our foot is pressed hard on the accelerator. Imagine how much further we could travel, how much more beautiful our work could be, if we weren't spending 80% of our life force simply overcoming the friction of our own internal resistance. To break this spell, we must understand the truth of what the ancient guides called the inherent unsatisfactoriness of all conditioned phenomena. This is not a pessimistic decree, it is a liberating structural fact about the universe. It means that no object, no title, no amount of money, no perfect relationship, and no level of professional achievement can ever provide our mind with a permanent place to rest. They cannot do it, because they are impermanent by nature. They are made of changing conditions, and the moment those conditions shift, the object changes, dissolves, or slips through our fingers. When we try to find absolute security in things that are inherently fluid, we are like a person trying to build a stone castle on top of an ocean wave. The jaw clenches because we feel the foundation shifting beneath us, and we think that if we just bite down harder, we can force the wave to stand still. Let us feel the liberation that comes when we stop demanding that impermanent things be permanent. Let us look at our schedules, our goals, and our professional identities through the lens of this truth. The company we work for will eventually dissolve. The projects we are losing sleep over will be forgotten. In a few decades, the body we are straining to optimize will return to the soil. When we see this clearly, the absolute urgency that drives our second arrow begins to evaporate. The internal auditor drops his clipboard, stunned by the vast scale of time. The problems that seemed like matter of life and death are revealed to be what they truly are: small, temporary ripples on the surface of a deep, ancient ocean. We realize that we don't need to chew through the universe to be safe. We are already here, already included in the grand design of existence, without needing to perform a single unit of labor to justify our presence. Let us bring this insight back down into the immediate physical laboratory of our flesh. Notice what happens to the clench when we see it not as an anatomical defect, but as an act of existential panic. The tension is an expression of our deep misunderstanding of how life works. It is the physical footprint of the illusion of control. When we realize that control is an impossibility, a mirage that recedes the closer we get to it, the muscular bracing loses its psychological justification. The soldier inside our tissues realizes that there is no fortress to defend, because there is no separate kingdom to protect. The border between the self and the world softens. We see that the wind passing through the trees outside is the same breath moving through our frozen chest, that the water of the ocean is the same fluid circulating through our compressed joints, that the space of the sky is the same awareness that illuminates our thoughts. Let us rest in this space of surgical clarity. We have used the wisdom of the non-separate mind to cut through the deception of the manager. We see the millstone for what it is, a machine running on empty air, destroying its own substance. We see the second arrow for what it is, our own aggressive reaction to the natural weather of life. We are no longer seduced by the lie that tension is a virtue or that grinding is the path to safety. We are ready to move from the phase of diagnosis to the phase of architecture. We are ready to learn how to actively deconstruct this mechanism, to discover the specific somatic keys that can unlock the hinges of our mouth and allow our energy to return to its natural fluid throne. Let us take a deep, spacious breath, allowing the air to widen the back of our throat, letting the upper and lower teeth drift even further apart into the silent expanse of the present moment. To step out of this internal factory, to truly dismantle the mechanism that has held our skull in an iron vice for decades, we must enter into a phase of deliberate, somatic re-education. We cannot approach this as a project to be completed, nor as an administrative task for the high-functioning executor to cross off a list. We must treat it as an art form, a quiet, daily ritual of non-doing, an architectural deconstruction of our own habitual armor. We are not trying to construct a new, relaxed persona. We are aiming to reveal the wide, open valley of our natural state that has been buried beneath the noise of the machinery. This requires us to develop a subtle, micromuscular discipline, an intimacy with our own tissue that is so refined that it can detect the very first spark of a clench before it has the opportunity to harden into bone. Let us begin this architecture of release by introducing the practice of somatic disoccupation. Wherever we are right now, whether sitting in a chair, lying on a floor, or standing in a room, let us first locate the gravity of the earth. We must remember that we do not have to hold ourselves up. The ground beneath us is a massive, unmoving presence that has been supporting mountains and oceans for billions of years. And it is entirely capable of taking our weight without our assistance. Let us consciously delegate the support of our frame to the floor. Feel the soles of the feet softening, expanding outward like warm wax melting into the floorboards. Feel the sitting bones sinking deeply into the cushion or the seat, letting the heavy bowl of the pelvis settle into its natural center of gravity. When the lower body surrenders its weight to the earth, a signal of safety is sent upward through the spinal column, whispering to the nervous system that the war is over, that the perimeter is secure, and that it is safe to let down our guard. Now, let us bring our attention up into the primary site of our modern labor, the dark hinges of the mouth. We must understand that we cannot force a muscle to relax by screaming at it with our mind. Relaxation is not an action, it is the absolute cessation of an action. It is a stepping away from the control panel. Instead of trying to open the mouth with muscular effort, let us simply drop the weight of the lower mandible. Imagine that the lower jaw is a heavy, separate piece of ivory, suspended from the skull by two thick elastic bands. Let those bands go completely slack. Allow gravity to take the jaw downward towards the chest. As the jaw drops, let the upper and lower molars part by at least the width of a single finger. Do not worry about how you look. Do not worry if the lips part slightly and the mouth hangs open in a state of apparent emptiness. This is the posture of radical non-resistance. It is the physical expression of a mind that has stopped trying to chew through its reality. As the jaw drops, let us shift our attention to the tongue, that great muscular explorer that we so often weaponize into an instrument of strategic calculation. Notice where the tongue is resting right now. If it is suctioned to the roof of the mouth, or if it is pressed hard against the back of the front teeth, let it drop. Let the tongue become heavy, wide and wet, resting like a thick, ancient leaf on the soft floor of the lower mouth. Feel the root of the tongue, deep down in the throat, widening and softening. When the root of the tongue relaxes, it opens a gateway in the throat fascia, allowing the breath to pass through without friction. Let us imagine that the mouth is no longer a tool for biting, consuming, or processing, but that it has become a vast, empty cavern, cool, shaded cave in the side of a mountain, open to the air, allowing the wind to blow through it from east to west without meeting any resistance whatsoever. Let us trace the effect of this release as it spreads upward into the face. When the masseter muscles let go, they release their grip on the zygomatic arch and the temporal bones. Feel the sides of the skull expanding outward, as if the iron helmet we have been wearing has been unbolted and lifted away. The skin of the forehead becomes smooth, wide, and cool, like the surface of a deep mountain lake at dawn. Before the first breeze stirs the water, the space between the eyebrows, the glabella, where we focus our hypervigilant concentration, softens and widens, letting go of the chronic frown of the analyst. The eyes, which have been locked in a narrow, pinpoint focus on screens and targets, are allowed to drop back into their sockets. Let the muscles behind the eyes relax, allowing the gaze to shift from a narrow, piercing arrow into a wide, peripheral view. Behold the entire room at once, including the space above you, below you, and to the sides, without grasping at any single object. You are no longer looking at the world, you are allowing the world to enter your awareness, like light washing over a mirror. With the upper perimeter relaxed. Let us observe the immediate transformation of our breathing. Because the jaw is open and the throat is soft, the breath no longer needs to bounce frantically in the upper chest. It can drop down past the collarbones, past the rib cage, moving like a deep, cool subterranean stream into the very bottom of the pelvic bowl. As you inhale, feel the belly expand outward naturally, effortlessly, like a balloon filling with water, without any muscular holding or aesthetic management. Do not pull the stomach in, do not try to maintain a flat, professional silhouette. Let the belly drop completely soft, letting it hang out into the world with a beautiful, uncarved, raw authenticity. When the belly drops, the thoracic diaphragm is finally liberated. It sinks downward with every inhalation, gently massaging the internal organs, stimulating the vagus nerve, and flooding the entire organism with the chemical intelligence of deep, restorative peace. Let us practice this state of non-manipulation through a specific mental disciplined technique of the wide-bordered mind. As we sit here in this state of physical softness, thoughts will inevitably continue to arise. The internal executor will not give up its throne. Without a fight, it will continue to throw up notifications, reminders, anxieties, and plans onto the screen of your awareness. It will say you are wasting time, you should be working. What about that email from yesterday? When these thoughts appear, do not fight them. Do not try to suppress them, judge them, or push them out of your mind. If you try to destroy a thought, you are simply clenching your jaw around it. Instead, treat the thought like a cloud passing through a wide panoramic sky. Let the thought arrive, let it stay for a moment, and let it drift away on its own current without ever biting down on it. Do not chew on the thought, do not analyze its meaning, do not trace its origins, and do not create a strategy to solve it. See it simply as a temporary vibration of energy, a brief ripple in the field of your awareness that requires absolutely no processing, no digestion, and no defense. If the mind drifts away, if you find that you have unconsciously closed your mouth and locked your teeth around a problem, do not condemn yourself. Simply notice the clench, view it with immense tenderness, and let the lower jaw drop once again, returning to the vast, empty cavern of the present moment. To deepen this architecture, let us contemplate our central metaphor slowing of the rusting millstone. Let us bring our awareness back to that heavy stone wheel spinning inside our skull, generating the white-hot heat of chronic anxiety. Through our practice of somatic relaxation, we are actively diverting the water wheel from the rushing stream of our adrenaline. Feel the great stone wheel beginning to decelerate. It is no longer racing at maximum velocity, it is slowing down, moving with a heavy, stately dignity. The friction decreases, the screeching sound of rock scraping against rock begins to quiet, replaced by a deep resonant silence that fills the interior of the skull. As the millstone slows, see the two massive stones gently parting from one another. The upper stone rises by just a millimeter, creating an empty luminous space between itself and the lower foundation. In that space there is no pressure, no grinding, and no obligation to produce. The remaining dust of your past anxieties, the fine grey powder of your old performances, is gently blown away by a cool, clean wind that enters through the open windows of the barn. The stone becomes cool, the axis rests. The machinery enters into a state of beautiful functional dormancy. The millstone is still there, fully intact, ready to be used whenever there is genuine grain to grind. But for now, it is completely, perfectly still. Let us integrate this discipline into the fabric of our daily modern lives through the practice of the threshold pause. We do not need to sit on a cushion for hours to maintain this freedom. We can practice it in the middle of our most demanding environments. When you are sitting at your desk and a new email notification flashes onto your screen, do not reach for the keyboard immediately. Pause for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, drop your lower jaw. Let your tongue fall soft. Let your belly drop and take one deep, unobstructed breath into your pelvis. Look at the notification from the vast empty cavern of your open mouth, rather than the tight, defensive fortress of your clenched teeth. When you approach your work from this space of somatic softness, your response will be entirely different. It will not be born of fear, reactivity, or the second arrow of performance. It will be an expression of your innate intelligence, clear, direct, and completely free of unnecessary friction. Practice this when you are walking through a doorway, when you are waiting for an elevator, when you are sitting in traffic, or when you are preparing to speak to a loved one. Use these everyday pauses as somatic alarms to check the perimeter line of your teeth. Ask yourself over and over again, am I grinding air right now? Am I chewing through a future that doesn't exist? The moment you catch the mechanism ticking, simply let it go. Relieve the soldier of his duty. Let the lower mandible fall toward the earth. Let the throat widen and step back into the river of fluid time. This is the training of a modern warrior of the mind, not a training in aggression or hardening, but a training in a radical, courageous vulnerability that allows us to meet the storms of life without breaking our own teeth. Let us sit with this training, feeling how the body begins to remember its native intelligence. The muscles have a memory. They remember how it felt to be unarmored before the world taught them to fear. They remember the deep, liquid relaxation of infancy, where the body moved with absolute fluid freedom, untroubled by the concept of a performance metric. As we repeat these practices of release throughout our days, the old, rusted neural pathways of the clench begin to wither from lack of use. New luminous pathways are formed, pathways of ease, of trust, of radical alignment with the present moment. We are rewiring our nervous system from the inside out, using our own awareness as the current that clears the debris from our channels. Feel the profound dignity of this posture. You are no longer a high-functioning executor driven by the invisible whip of insufficiency. You are a sovereign mountain of presence, rooted deeply in the soil of the earth, your peak open to the vast, changing sky. Let the breath move through you like a great wind passing through the canyons of an empty land, carrying away the last traces of your effort, leaving only a wide, clear space of pure being. We are standing on the very edge of a new territory, a landscape where existence is no longer an obstacle to be conquered, but a beautiful, unfathomable dance to be witnessed. Let us take one more conscious breath together into this newly constructed space, letting the jaw drop even lower, letting the silence widen as we prepare to step fully through the gates of our own liberation. We step now into a landscape where the heavy clockwork has finally run out of weights, its iron pendulum swinging to a gentle organic halt in the center of our chest. Let us look around this newly cleared internal territory, not with the calculating eyes of the manager, but with the pristine, unburdened clarity of a traveler who has just crossed a high mountain pass into a wide, sunlit basin. The air here has changed. It no longer tastes of synthetic urgency or the metallic sharpness of adrenaline. It is cool, thick, and spacious, carrying the scent of raw, uncarved wood and wet earth. Our physical face has elongated, dropping its sharp angles and defensive geometry, returning to the primordial asymmetry of a living, breathing creature. The temples are cool, the forehead is a wide and open screen of undisturbed light, and the back molars rest completely apart, floating in a vast, silent valley where no enemy approaches and no fortress needs to be maintained. This is the state of radical indolencia, state that is not a passive sinking into sleep, but a highly awake, luminous presence that stands precisely in the center of the current passing second. We feel an unshakable solidity in our bones, a deep and immovable anchoring that does not depend on our muscular effort, but on our absolute surrender to the gravity of the earth. We are like an ancient stone monument that has stopped bracing itself against the fault line, realizing that the earth beneath it is not a threat to be managed, but the very foundation that holds it upright. From this seat of deep somatic sovereignty, we see the world moving around us in its natural, fluid rhythm. The emails arrive, the notifications flash, the social currents shift, and the clouds of human weather pass through our sky, yet they no longer trigger the emergency hydraulic press of our jaw. We can behold them, understand them, and respond to them from a profound, spacious non-attachment, knowing that we do not need to bite down on the river to keep from drowning. Let us reflect on the final, elegant transmission of the historical tradition, delivered beneath the fading light of the twin trees as the Great Awakening prepared to dissolve its physical container. The last words were not a call to arms, nor a complex blueprint for further execution. They were a simple, luminous reminder of our inherent wholeness. We were told that all conditioned things are subject to decay, but that our true natureth wide, open sky of awareness that witnesses that decay is never born and never dies. We were urged to be islands unto ourselves, to be our own refuge, not by building thicker walls of muscular defense, but by discovering the unshakable space of the present moment that requires no protection. We are already whole, we are already included. We have always been home. Even when we were grinding our bone into dust in the middle of the night, trying to justify our existence to an invisible auditor who never existed. As we prepare to step back across the threshold of our daily lives, let us carry this spacious cave of the mouth with us like a secret sanctuary. Let us move through the corridors of our modern offices, our crowded streets, and our digital networks with our jaws unlatched, our tongues soft, and our bellies dropped into the gravity of the earth. Let us become a quiet, subversive presence in a world of hyper-efficiency individuals who can move slowly, listen deeply, and allow wide spaces of silence to exist between our words. When we stop chewing through our time, we restore the sacred dimension of human life. We turn our conversations into communions, our work into an art form, and our simple presence into a healing medicine for a civilization that is breaking its own teeth against the concept of tomorrow. The stones of our inner millstone are now wide apart, resting in the cool shade, completely still. The stream of our life force is returning to its natural channels, flooding our limbs with vitality, our hearts with warmth, and our minds with an unclouded, panoramic vision. The machine has been dismantled, the soldier has laid his weapons down in the tall grass, and the executioner has stepped down from the podium to rest in the grass. We look out at the horizon of our lives, no longer searching for the next milestone to conquer or the next problem to chew through, but simply resting in the boundless, unmanipulated space of pure being, letting the universe turn itself without our assistance. And so, as the echo of the iron gears fades entirely into the silent expanse of this room, and as your lower jaw settles into its native heavy gravity, one final, luminous inquiry remains to dissolve the last traces of your effort. If your worth is not a currency to be earned through the grinding of your bones, and if the universe is already holding you perfectly without your permission, who are you when you finally stop trying to bite down on the wind?